working here. It does actually to be quite good. You get Wi-Fi no matter where you move about, so hopefully it should be all right. But if you hear any background noise, it might be folk coming out of the debating chamber discussing any of the topics. So, but hopefully we should be okay. Okay, moving on then. First off, apologies for absence. I think we have apologies from Councillor Lafferty and Councillor Cunningham. No other apologies submitted. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Moving on then, item 3 in the agenda, the General Fund Capital Programme for 2021-22. And I'm assuming, is it yourself, Barbara, that's covering that?
It is. Thanks, Leader. The report presents a position statement on the General Fund capital expenditure as at the 31st of December 21. This shows a shortfall in resource of 443,000, representing 1.7% of the resources available, which varies slightly from the 1.06 stated in the report. However, the 1.7% is still within manageable limits. The report reflects the updated project positions as reported to Council on the 3rd of March and advises of a number of movements in the current year's capital programme, which the Cabinet is invited to approve. These movements relate mainly to timing of projects, reflecting shortages of materials and labour, as well as backlogs in tendering and site starts as COVID restrictions have been lifted. This has resulted in significant slippage of 16 million in the capital expenditure from that last reported in November 21, as projects take longer to complete. However, spend will run into the following year. We are now seeing an increase in construction costs affecting many projects due to shortages and market saturation. Officers will continue to monitor the position and submit reports to future Cabinet meetings should costs exceed budgeted levels for projects. In particular, a report will be submitted to Cabinet on the 7th of April regarding increased tender prices in respect of Mearns Castle High School sports pitch. Detailed explanations of reasons for major movements within the programme are set out in sections 5 and 6 of the report. The Cabinet is invited to note the report and approve the changes within the programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, for that and our comprehensive report. Yeah, I know that these are significant issues ongoing when some of the tender prices are coming back significantly higher. I had been making some inquiries actually with colleagues, and I know that it seems to be a general Europe-wide issue, probably even beyond that, in terms of construction costs. Obviously getting materials are increasing as well as a difficulty in actually getting construction workers, which is an ongoing problem. So yeah, we will have to obviously keep a close eye on it and monitor that accordingly. Caroline, you want to come in?
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Barbara. And I get all the project timings and COVID and Brexit and Ukraine and everything else and all that. I just wondered, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Cabinet report on the 7th of April about Mearns Castle, because I'm really keen for that to go ahead as quickly as possible, because as we know, it's already been delayed through no fault of our own for a year. Can I ask a stupid question about borrowing? You've mentioned in section 5 or paragraph 5 about the borrowing has been reduced by 13.235 million, understandably. I just wondered, do you borrow, you know, it was mentioned at the last Cabinet about, or full Council, it might have been, about prepaying and pre-buying gas and that kind of utilities. Do we borrow and put that money aside, or do we sometimes borrow and put money aside because interest rates are still quite low? I understand if we borrow, then we obviously have to pay interest in that, but is it cheaper to borrow when the rates are really, really low and put that money aside rather than wait for 6 months, a year or whatever and borrow more money at a higher rate, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we don't borrow for specific projects, so but there is a cost of carrying borrowing. So if we invest in additional funds at the moment, we've got to invest. If we borrow additional funds at the moment, we've got to invest them and it's difficult to find places that we find secure and that will give us the money back, basically, and have a decent rate of interest. So especially as interest rates are so low at the moment. So we have a plan of when we're going to borrow and when the optimum time is to do that borrowing. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that there is a cost of carrying until we incur the costs of in capital. So if we were to borrow that 20 million in the current year, that we would have had to fund the capital expenditure, but we haven't incurred that capital expenditure, then we're incurring a cost all the time until we incur that capital expenditure, if that makes sense.
I know, absolutely, but I presume you look at, and I'm not questioning you, but I'm just curious and working out in my own head. So if I get that the money you have to carry and pay interest on, but if you're going to, as we all anticipate, interest rates are going to, you know, go up exponentially in the next year or two, do you borrow for future, knowing that yes, you'll have to bear the brunt of the carrying costs, but actually if you wait a year, interest rates might be up however many percent. I presume you have to weigh that carefully, constantly,
Yes,
and look at that.
There are part of the Treasury strategy will list out our prudential indicators, and that limits the amount that we can borrow for. So we can't just go and fill our boots and say, right, we'll take 100 million now because we know interest rates are going to go up. There are limits to what we can take in advance.
Okay.
Thanks for answering my silly questions.
That's not silly.
Not at all. Not perfectly valid, Caroline. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? Not on that basis, anyway, happy to note and approve the movements within the programme. Note the shortfall of 0.443 million and that the income and expenditure on the programme will be managed and reported on a regular basis, and agree to recommend to the Council that the movements within the programme be approved. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Barbara. Moving on then, item 4 in the agenda, the Housing Capital Programme. And I presume, Andy, are you covering that?
Nope, I think it's me again.
No, you, Barbara, all right.
Okay. Thanks, Leader. The report similarly measures the capital spend as at the 31st of December 21, this time for the Housing Capital Programme. The report shows a shortfall in resources of 160,000, representing 1.25% of the resources available. As with the General Fund report, this report reflects revised total project costs approved by Council on the 3rd of March. There have been a number of movements in the programme which the Cabinet is invited to approve. Once again, these relate mainly to timing delays due to the significant impact of COVID-19 on both existing and new housing projects. The report shows a slippage of 2.6 million in capital expenditure from that last reported in November 21 as projects take longer to complete. Further details are provided in sections 5 and 6 of the report. Increasing construction cost pressures are also impacting on the Housing Capital Programme, and officers will continue to monitor this position and provide updates in future reports if costs cannot be contained. Cabinet is invited to note the report and approve the transfers and movements within the programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Again, comprehensive report given out showing our current position. Anyone get any comments or anything on the paper? No. Okay, on that basis then we're happy to note and approve the current movements within the programme, note the shortfall of 0.160 million and that the income and expenditure in the programme will be managed and reported on a regular basis. Agree to recommend to the Council that the movements within the programme be approved. Are we happy with those recommendations, colleagues? Thank you, it's approved. Item 5 on the agenda is charging for services for 2022-23, and I believe, Jerry, you're back here.
Thanks, Chair. This report seeks approval for changes in licensing fees and charges for financial year 2022-2023. The report's fairly self-explanatory, but as Cabinet's aware, the licensing function is expected to pay for itself, and therefore charges have to keep keep tabs with the costs that are incurred in actually carrying out the administration of the licensing function. So the report is setting out new charges. We are and have been conscious of the impact of COVID on various licence holders over the years. And so we've tried to ensure that the charges reflect a small increase, but not one that will damage the various service providers to any great extent. And that being the case, the charges are linked to inflationary rates, which have been agreed with the Chief Accountant at 3.7%. So the various charges, current and proposed, are set out in Appendix 1, and the roundup of figures, as you'll see from the appendix, has been fixed at charges under £5 rounded to the next 10 pence, charges under £20 rounded to the next 50 pence, charges over £20 rounded to the nearest pound. So we've ensured that the council is recovering its costs of actually fulfilling the licensing function, but as I said, try to minimise the impact on the licence holders themselves, who've gone through a fairly rough time with COVID.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Jerry. I appreciate the difficulties that many businesses, particularly taxis, etc., have gone through over the last 2 years, and that's been a difficult time for everyone concerned. Also happy to note that although it's a 3.7% increase, the inflation is actually running significantly higher than that, so we are trying to mitigate it as much as we possibly can. Caroline?
Just a small query. I'm just curious as to what the theatre licence for 1 year was, and that it's no longer available.
Well, we are obliged to provide certain licences. I couldn't tell you specifically what that one was, Caroline, I'm afraid, off the top of my head. But we have had licence applications in the past coming through from small groups who, local groups who wish to run artistic events and set themselves up as theatres in particular locations. And that particular case, I would assume that particular group is no longer functioning, and therefore it's unlikely that we're going to be getting anything of that nature coming back in. Obviously, if events changed and we did get someone coming back in, then we would bring another paper back to recreate a theatre licensing charge if necessary. But it's so rare and so uncommon an occurrence that we don't feel it's necessary to have one at this particular point in time.
Thanks, Jerry. Any other questions, folks? No, on that basis then it's recommended that we alter the charges for 22-23 in accordance with the table in Appendix 1, where an increase occurs. The increases are approximately 3.7%, being the inflation rate advised by the Chief Accountant. Are we happy with that recommendation, colleagues? Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Moving on then, item 6 is our roads resurfacing works programme for 22-23. Again, I presume, Andy, you covering that, or is it Gillian?
No, fine. That's
Gillian.
Fine. I'll cover it, thanks. This report is just the usual annual report where we're seeking approval for the forthcoming year's resurfacing of carriageways and footways. It's interesting that this is us going into year 4 of the additional capital resources that have been provided. So paragraph 6 and 7 gives a little indication of some of the things that we've managed to achieve. So, for example, since this started, we've done 96 sections of carriageway and 32 sections of footway. And I think it's worthy of the Cabinet to note that those resurfacing programmes and projects would only have benefited from safety defect repairs in the past. So, a substantial amount of road has been resurfaced. Also, each year we've spent about £200,000 to £300,000 on upgrading street lighting, replacing lanterns with more efficient LEDs, and we've also upgraded and replaced 15 sets of traffic lights in pedestrian crossings. So once again, what we're proposing is that because the one that drags us down every single time because we've got so much of them is the Condition C and unclassified roads. Category C, sorry, and unclassified roads. So what we're proposing in the appendix attached is once again a roads works programme for 22-23, but concentrating again on those categories to try to lift them up. And basically that's all that I really wanted to say. I'm asking you to approve the appendix so that we can get on and start carrying out the works and or tendering make sure that we try to do as much as possible within the financial year 22-23 by getting an early start through the commitment from the Cabinet. That was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I very much appreciate the report. I think it highlights the huge amount of work that has been done over the last few years on our roads network. And I think the significant improvement is actually there for all to see, despite the fact that I know we will always get some issues arising and some complaints. But I think there is a significant difference as to where we were, 5 years ago in terms of roads and where we are now. And certainly that's been a major piece of work that has made a difference, I believe, across the authority. Happy to open it up for any comments from anyone else. Caroline.
Sorry, me again. Not a question, just a comment to say thanks, Andy, because as others know, the vast majority of complaints we get is about unclassified roads in our residential areas, and I think that's excellent that we're concentrating on that. So yes, well done. It'll be great when they're all done, right enough, but no, I'm glad we can get it started. Hopefully 1st of April, get on the case.
Yeah, thank you.
Colin.
Thanks, Tony. I just wanted to ask Andy a wee question. Your work must be subject to all the inflationary pressures that everybody else on the planet is subject to. So is that reducing what we can do with the money that we set aside to do this 3 or 4 years ago?
Can I ask Gillian to come in on that one?
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Merrick. We have had some issues during COVID, obviously, but in terms of the materials that we use on the roads, we don't seem to be suffering the same inflation that other materials do. So at this moment in time, our tenders are coming in not too bad. Some of them are over, but it's not significant at the moment.
So far, so good then. Thanks. Great work. Yeah.
Thanks,
so
Gillian.
it's hard not to please everybody all the time, but these are the ones, as Caroline said, that do attract a lot of attention and negative impact, negative comment. But thank you.
No, I think, as has been mentioned, that the work programme has been extensive and continues to be so. I think the list attached covers a number of areas that we know we've probably all had issues raised with us over the last few months. And so it's good to note that that list is not only substantial, but will create a significant improvement for all of those areas. And there are works that have been needing done. So it's good to see a lot of it coming forward. Are we happy then, colleagues, that the Cabinet is asked to approve the road resurfacing works programme as detailed in Appendix A, and we can release that and let folk know the work that is ongoing? Okay, thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone. That concludes our business for this morning. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Thank you.
Good.
Hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you.